It's good to be back in Montreal. What can I tell you? We've had the pleasure of basically going from shop to shop. We went to Fletcher's, we went to thank you, and a whole host of other places. And somebody was talking about tacos just earlier, I don't know why. But I have to tell you that the gefilte fish tacos at Fletcher's are amazing. Fantastic. They were just fantastic, and thank you, Kat. And thank you also Susan and Nathalie and Julian and Jackie Sundberg. I'm just so thrilled to be here with these two women. I can't even begin to tell you. And so what I want to talk about a little bit is the history of baking. And as an Ashkenazi Jew, I certainly think of things like Mandelbrot and Rugelach and Kamishbrot and Danish and Kuchen when I think of Jewish baking. But just like Jewish cooking, as Joan alluded to, Jewish baking it's a story of Torah and Kashrut, it's a story of expulsion and immigration, it's a story of adapting and adopting all the foods from the lands which the Jews went to and then inevitably left. But before I talk about that, and so I want to talk about bread and challah, because that really tells the tale of Jewish baking. But before I talk to that, I want to talk a little bit about a term that a sociologist has developed called kitchen Judaism. And it speaks to our connection to the foods of our heritage and how important they are in our life long after observance and ritual has left us. And I think that's really a nugget of truth in the Jewish communities in North America. Like I was telling Kat a story today, and I wasn't actually going to talk about this, but it occurred to me that it's so true, and so true of how we identify through the kitchen. And so I was telling her about a story, which has nothing to do with baking, by the way, about the first time I made chicken soup, which wasn't until my 20s. And I thought to myself, oh, big deal, you know, chicken soup, everybody makes it all the time. But I felt such a sense of pride and accomplishment by making this chicken soup that, you know, linked me to my lineage, that it was quite overwhelming. And although it's less now, I have to tell you, every time I make chicken soup or I make challah every week, I feel connected. I really feel connected. So I think there's something very true about the tradition, certainly in baking, of women learning at their mother's knees, certainly in the times when young women couldn't go to school, and the richness that went from generation to generation. You know, that whole tradition of Bel Peh, which is not just for stories, it's for the kitchen, I think, as well. Anyway, I want to talk about bread, because the word challah and the whole notion of challah is not mentioned so much in the Bible. So this is where the Torah comes into our traditions. Because bread has always been important, and especially important to the Jews, and to the Torah, to the notion of kashrut, as I mentioned, and certainly transcended and transformed what we know of as challah today. So in the Bible, the bread that our patriarchs ate was very much similar to pita, right? In fact, the ancient word comes from pitur, that's the ancient word for it, which means to split. And you know, it was just a mixture of grains and water. Some people think there was salt in it, although that's never actually been historically proved. I don't know if you have different information than I do.
Right, I'm just thinking about your bagels again.
No, but you know what? That's actually really interesting because, okay, I'll get away from
it wouldn't have had salt, I'll tell you, because I went well, you better finish, because it's your...
We'll talk about salt in a minute. But so bread is mentioned in the Torah right at the very beginning, when Abraham is welcoming guests and or strangers to his home, and Sarah, and he provide water to wash their feet and bread to refresh themselves with. And it's certainly mentioned in Bamidbar or Leviticus, where God instructs the children of Israel to make bread, to actually 2 stacks of 6 breads, and they're all called breads, even though they were pita, to take to the high table, to the Shulchan Aruch, in the temple, and then they were sprinkled with frankincense. And actually they were supposed to last for a whole week. Somehow they miraculously stayed fresh. And then the Kohanim ate them. Also, in the Torah, we're told that actually no meal is complete without bread. And of course you have the blessings over bread. But if you're not having bread, it's just a snack, it's just a nosh. And of course the rabbis talked about how there were only 5 grains that were allowed to make bread. Of course, you know, there's something in the Torah, I believe, that says if you eat bread for breakfast and in the morning, you're going to stave off the demons, you're going to stave off evil thoughts, you won't have bad breath, you will be learned and people will learn from you, you're going to make good on all your lawsuits, etc., etc. And so we know how important that is. But nowhere is challah mentioned. Then we get to the story of the Exodus. And we all know that the Jews, and also, Natalie, if you need to break me off, because I can talk about this ad nauseum, just so. We get to the story of Exodus. And of course, the story of Exodus is the story of manna, and how manna rained down every day for the Jews to eat during their exile. But on Friday, they got 2 portions of manna, because it had to last them for the Sabbath. And then the Jews land in the land of Israel, or Canaan, as it was called then. And so they can make, now that they're no longer a nomadic tribe, they can make leavened bread, because before that, and before the Exodus, they only made unleavened bread. But it is said that lest the children of Israel think that it was their own toil and labor that let them make the bread that they made, still not called challah, you have to take a little piece off of it to remind you that it's not of your own labor, that it's the covenant with God and his special people, and God that gave that to you. So it was 1/24 of the entire batch of dough, or the size of an olive, and that's the first time that we hear the word challah, because that's taking of the challah. But even then, the loaves made of white flour, which was reserved for the Sabbath, were actually oval loaves. They weren't anywhere near, you know, the enriched, soft, fluffy, moist, egg-laden dough that we know today. And that actually was true until much, much later, okay? Yes, the Sephardians started to put saffron, and as Jews became more affluent, honey was added, and then sometimes eggs were added. But the braided challahs that we now know actually were a Christian German tradition. The Christian Germans made those loaves for their Sunday dinners and whatnot, and they were very, very ornately decorated. And so that is actually in the 15th century, in the mid-1400s, when the braided loaves that we know as challah, although I have to tell you they were known as many, many other names as well. We were actually talking about that, Joan and I, earlier today. They were known as barchetz and schlitzlitz and many, many other names.
And the Shabbat.
And at Shabbat, that's right, especially in the Sephardic tradition. They were called the Shabbat loaves. They were not called challah. And it all, so the braids were because of some of the Southern Austrians and these Christian Germans. But again, we're back to the manna as well, okay? Because the 6 braided challahs commemorate the, there are 2 loaves. They're both 6 braided. Those remind us, and are told to remind us, of the 12 tribes of Israel. Okay, the 2 loaves, which most observant Jews have on their tables, remind us of the 2 portions of manna that God did give to the Jews during their exile. And of course, the sprinkling of poppy seeds or sesame seeds, or if you're at Lehamim Bakery in Israel, in Tel Aviv, all sorts of other seeds and nuts that are sprinkled on it, come from also the Torah, where the manna was likened to coriander seeds, because it fell right from the heavens, and that began the tradition. And so I think we can see, and then of course it moved all over the place, because the Germans then moved to Lithuania, and other Germans started doing a Wasser challah, and that's a watercolor. Okay, and so all I wanted to say with that, in America, it became richer and richer, more like the koches. And I just want to add one more thing, because we talked about the bagels, and we so identify as Jews with the bagel, and it was the Jews in Poland who made it because they couldn't sell bread to Christians. But in fact, it's a Polish thing, much like rugula is from Hungary and was called rogo in Poland. There you go.